Hello and welcome to another episode of Sustainability Leads, a podcast where we bring you leaders, South African leaders on everything corporate sustainability. Today I have with us Ms. Nola Richards of Vodacom, but I won't introduce her. I'll let Nola introduce herself. Nola, who is Nola Richards?
Thanks, Aching, and thank you again for inviting me to be part of this dialogue. One of my core values is the fact that in dialogue and in collaboration is how we make a positive impact. So first of all, I'm a mom. Balancing a career and mom doesn't always work out very well, but my son is the thing that keeps me grounded in terms of what I do. And interestingly enough, he's also a core part of how I started on this journey. I also have a habit of taking in rescues. The joke in my family is I'm the only one who's not adopted. Between the pets, the dad, the everything, I'm the non-adopted one. But it talks to the fact that I really believe in impact and community. I head up Vodacom Group ESG and Sustainable Business, working very closely with my colleagues across the continent, as well as my colleagues in the UK and in Europe, where we are really trying to drive the group's performance, manage the transition, and then very, very importantly, to drive social inclusion using the technology that we have access to.
That's really interesting. And corporate sustainability is an evolving profession. How did you get here?
So, I think in a way many people my age maybe I started through CSI work or corporate investment work. And I was I started at Barclays. It was my first corporate job, but one of the things I loved about them was the fact that they had employee engagement programs which included volunteering, matched funding. The team didn't really have much going, so I actually started the whole process within Barclays Africa at the time, which was a very small office. But to see the positive impact, we worked very closely with different organizations, but over extended time, and with partners. So it took from everything from really one of the projects was a creche. Somebody had dumped a container, but not much else. We paved, we planted trees, we got playground equipment. We took them to the fire station to try and help them understand fire safety because they're living in informal settlements. And it was just a gift, not only in terms of that, but also how people wanted to be involved. I took the board of Barclays to Orlando Children's Home, and I think that was the biggest catalyst when I saw a baby who didn't want to get let go. Like literally that baby was holding on for dear life. And I think that's not only my personal journey, that's when I decided to adopt, but it just made me realize that you have to be intentional, you have to be structured, and we must challenge companies to do things properly, and not to negatively impact people and then contribute through their business models to taking the continent forward.
That's interesting because you come from the CSI side into sustainability. And I think out there, the one question people always ask is the difference. What's the difference between CSI and corporate sustainability? You've studied both sides of the profession. What is it? What differentiates the two?
Well, I mean, it's a very intentional journey. So I think, first of all, community is something we all live with every day, whether it's in our church, in our homes, at the school. And it is a very important and valuable part of what needs to be done in the world. But through different career opportunities, which interestingly enough, very often came around because of corporate restructures and me losing my job and new doors opening for me, was to say, how do you take that shift from a very smaller, yes, impactful, but where you can use a whole company and you're actually using the business model and the gravitas of the group to drive direction. So really looking at corporate practices, making sure that sustainable development practices are actually put in place, and not from a charity's perspective. So from a perspective of this is the way we must operate responsibly, but also how do we use the business and the services and products that we provide to make sure we're taking more people, and the scale between the two is completely different. At Vodacom, our foundations do absolutely incredible work, but impacting in the region of millions. For our customers, we are looking at 220 million people who we can impact, and to me that scale and making sure that you do it with the correct practices in mind. As I mentioned, knowing that we live in a finite world of resources, so we must take care of those, but how do we actually intentionally through everything make sure that we have humanity and the planet at the heart of what we do? And I think that's what is exciting about this, is it's not an ad hoc charitable feeling. This is about how we should behave 24/7.
And it's quite long-term. You take a long-term view, right? Yeah. So the telecommunications sector plays a critical role in digital transformation, and it's evolved over time. It's actually changed our lives, so to speak. How do you see the role of this sector in driving sustainability for the long term?
So I think, like everything, there's lots of positives, but then there are negative impacts that we need to manage. So starting with the very first, technology and digital tools is a foundation at the moment. As you're saying, the world has shifted fundamentally. And nowadays, it's the backbone of anything and everything that's done. So whether you're an SME who is hustling to get your products, deliver it, you're using it, or if you are a large corporate, or if you're a government who wants to deliver services to society. So for me, that being a foundational base. Then in terms of the potential positives, technology can be a catalyst for decarbonization. We'll chat about the challenges, which obviously higher energy consumption, water consumption that comes with it. But the use of technology, I mean, we have some of the most incredible IoT solutions that drive efficiency in resources, allow people, provide the analytics where they can run their fleets in a way where they can manage the efficiency and the carbon emissions out of that. And over time, we've helped companies decarbonize 2.4 million tons of carbon emissions. So, and I'm hoping that potential is just gets bigger and bigger. I mentioned working with government. We are an infrastructure partner, whether it be with government or private sector, but how do we work and help provide society with digital services? We know in Africa, access to healthcare, access to education, access to government services is a challenge. So working with them in terms of infrastructure is critical. And then drive of inclusive growth. As more and more people have access to these tools, have access to the internet, so opens up so many opportunities, whether it be just education or it is a career opportunity. That platform to include people. One of the biggest things that Vodacom has been doing is around financial inclusion. M-Pesa was launched in 2007 when the world of the unbanked was huge. We now have a situation in Kenya where 97% of the population has access to financial services because of M-Pesa. So you've gone from a very exclusionary society to one where people can actively participate.
Yeah. You talked about the impacts in as much as the sector is driving transformation. You mentioned decarbonizing as one area where there's a lot of value that the sector is able to add. But at the same time, there are negative consequences. I'm immediately thinking about the data centers and the amount of energy that data centers are consuming. I'm thinking about e-waste, right? Mm-hmm. And probably issues around data ethics. And I think you and I have talked about this before. Are these the biggest sustainability concerns? Are there more? And how is the sector dealing with them?
You've definitely nailed 3 of them. So decarbonization is definitely one of the ones which we are grappling with, which has to be dealt with within the context of the energy environment that we have in Africa. It's challenging, but for example, we've been working with stakeholders where we're saying, how do we not only take ourselves forward in this, but how do we take sectors forward? How do we take countries forward? Electronic waste is a very big focus for us, not only from the waste perspective, but there's limited resources. We are going to run out at some point. So how do we create that circular economy whilst bringing people in? In that area, again, collective action is important. My colleagues in the DRC started having these engagements and these discussions, and we've seen other corporates outside of the sector, the beverage manufacturers of the world going, gee, we've got fridges galore that nothing's happening with. And it's become such a discussion that the government is even saying this not only is a risk to the country, but it's an opportunity. So I think these are big challenges. You spoke around the ethics. I'm sure everybody is well aware of some of the scary risks that are coming at us. Data privacy, I'd like to say, is probably one of the mature, well-managed ones generally across the board. For us now, it's the AI. As much as AI can be used for good, AI can be used for harm. In South Africa, we've seen a lot of stuff happening around these nudification apps, where people's dignity is being robbed. So this is one of, I must say, probably the thing that keeps me up most at night. I mean, the environment is important, but the potential that technology can be used to harm a child, harm you or me, is something that does concern, and we're actively working that. We've developed AI tools. We have an AI governance board that we assess our products to check for these things. And then I think another big thing is supply chain. Obviously, supply chain is an area which remains of a very high concern for us, both from a human rights perspective as well as a resiliency perspective. As we see change to the climate, we all very well recall the floods in KZN, where for many of us, our equipment could not come into the country. So yeah, climate resilience and supply chain is a very important aspect.
Yes, and just back to AI, the other day I was reading and someone was saying, do not confuse tech and AI. I thought AI was a product of tech.
For sure. I mean, without technology, i.e. the equipment and the connectivity, you know, AI for me is a tool that uses technology. That's why, for example, the data centers, you know, they're becoming bigger and bigger, consuming energy because they need the technology on which to run the AI, the large language models. So for me, yes, if you look at it very literally, yes, the technology is different, but the AI works off of the technology.
Yeah, and I'm just constantly, you know, confused. It's no longer the era where you could go online quickly and read an article and there was no question around whether the article was true or false, or whether the image was true or false. How do you govern that, or are you taking away the creativity that comes with the application?
If we knew the answer. No, I mean, these are very important. So, and I think there's multiple aspects. I mentioned our AI governance framework. We've actually, through our COSEC and our ethics office, we've come up with a digital ethics strategy, because this is very important to us. Education, absolutely essential. So customers, employees, we really need people to be discerning and to check and challenge these things for ourselves. It is very tricky, and I know I personally felt the disappointment when I've engaged with something and it's really brought into my heart, and then in the small print I see it says AI generated, and then you kind of feel robbed. It's something that's moving very, very quickly. We are seeing today is the Safer Internet Day, where they're collectively we're standing up against things such as nudification apps and so forth. So it's going to take a lot of vigilance, governance for sure, but I think we can't wait for the governance. We as society and as humanity must try and put the pressure on and ensure that we show that this is not acceptable.
Yeah, and the final one is on the geopolitics, and just really curious, how does a big multinational like maybe say Vodafone, right? How do you handle the uncertainty, or the certainty, if you like, that comes with the current
of uncertainty, for sure.
Yeah.
So we're very fortunate, first of all, in terms of having strong leadership, and Vodafone sits on our board, and we've had this discussion at a board level, where as responsible directors, they get the correct level of information, but then it's discussed and debated to say, right, what is our position in terms of this? How are we going to think about what are our values, and how did those values play out in the organization? So whilst, because we've got the global geopolitics, but in our footprint we have also a lot of local politics. For example, in the DRC, we're very mindful of the conflict and what that brings to us, and the risks that it brings to our employees, our customers, but also the opportunities and how we must respond appropriately. We've debated this and we've discussed this, including with my colleagues at Vodafone. And for me, I'm very proud to say we're remaining resilient in terms of what we're doing. Unanimously across our leadership, our board and Vodafone is we are not walking back anything. We still believe that we have a responsibility from an environmental and a human perspective and human dignity perspective to keep doing what we're doing. Yes, maybe we're not going to stick our heads above the parapet for somebody to take a shot at us, but we are going to continue. We will still stand forth on our position, and we will talk about it and make sure that we continue to have the discussions and the debate pushing us forward.
So a while ago when we were speaking offline, and we were saying that as a network, as a platform for companies in South Africa, when companies are doing well, we feel that, and we see when they're doing well, they begin to invest more into the economy, into sustainability, if you like. In 2026, South Africa's economic indicators are nearly all positive. What more are you bringing into the market within this landscape?
Yeah. So I think both within South Africa, but also within across the continent, one of the things that we are very committed to doing is, first of all, playing our role as a corporate. And I think it's very important in terms of just the basics of even, for example, paying fair taxes. If governments do not have access to resources, how do they deliver? And then very intentionally, Shamil always asks each leader is to go away and look at what the government's development objectives are. And then he always asks the question, so how do we help? Which I absolutely love. He's very clear, it's not about charity. He's about saying, right, we have a bouquet of products and services. How do we actually take these and make sure that they are part of the solution? Whether it be provision of government services or growing and expanding. We've spoken about the digital world and the complexities now. SMEs need to keep their mind on the business of doing business, not worrying about cybersecurity, etc. And that is where we are moving to providing those services to give SME and entrepreneurs peace of mind to focus on the success of the business while knowing these things are handled. So, and making sure we stop and we reflect, what is the call to action? How do we invest in the country? So whether it be through a license commitment where we've agreed to participate in connecting schools, hospitals, police stations, whilst the word obligations is used, it's something which we kind of say it's our entry into the game. If we want society to thrive and to be profitable, we need to make sure this is possible. And being innovative. One of the solutions we've got, which is called Just For You Town, again came from the reflecting to say, there's certain areas, because of the local economies, it would be very difficult for people to purchase data. So we've come up with a tool where we understand what the earning power and capacity of that town is, and then we price it so that it is becomes accessible to that community. So I must say our teams are always on the edge, always looking to see how do we respond, how do we show up, whether it's through healthcare, provision of pension, making data more accessible, and even smartphones more accessible, through things like device financing, working with DFIs, to see how we can put rebates on smartphones just to make sure more and more people have access.
Yeah, and on that note, I think we are also 2 days away from the State of the Nation address by the President, and we'll be getting our cues definitely from the menu there, right?
100%.
Awesome. So thank you, Nola, so much. And that brings us to the end of our podcast today.
Thank you.